supply processing investment is high, and potential push Trump upward. So 25 Trump so highly reports sustainable predictable supply of mineral support. Enthusiasm for Alaska from the mining jurisdiction of resulting in lowest in the paradise pebble and pitted use of underused processing and apply with reading it would operate for 20 years now portfolio exposed to Trump, who is positive current supply chains rely on unsustainable or international sources. Safe production is key to the aerospace sector. Mud 23 readings about high melting and American airspace exposed to reach shortage to detention develop shortages develop substitutes most geochemically scarce dominant has been outlawed for jet engine plates given military commercial aviation is U.S. is dominant. Consumer demand will continue. Recycling rates are high. Possible recycled 8% of waste not abated from supply abundance not suggest supplies to secure RE supply. The risk of the highest Chile's unrest risk concerns about instability key factors criticality Chile's have the world supply policies that emphasize diversification and protection and America's emphasis on minimizing exposure to foreign entities for supply chain uncertainties remain a key issue specifically their necessary ingredient hypersonics key coating heat resistant coating quantum 15 carbon components oxidation or unavoidable temperature it's high resistance coating and essential radium attractive for high unique modules and strict corrosion and resistance stability that's ideal for coating nozzles and hypersonic vehicles high temperature propulsion and control use radium combustion and noises of hypersonic radium is promising for rocket nozzles missile coating is key to hypersonic development Ringo 25 U.S. successfully developing advanced missile tracking of golden dome and assessing interceptors destroy missile invention solidify the dome is a larger fleet than 10 year base of facing U.S. hypersonics leveraging carbon combustions high temperature allies manufacturing lines scarce facilities Russia achieve operational status China produce now march a larger the arsenal than China's missiles overrun the radars and develop simultaneous multi-states exotic materials are difficult and slow all is high temp allies with thermal coating that survive flight lower cost the speeds of manufacturing additive manufacturing span capabilities of metals only crucial hypersonic the arsenal stagnation causes extinction white 25 piercing in Indo-Pacific and Russia and Europe come to HVT hypersonic right unique and kinetic effects the PLA has a launch strike from the mainland on U.S. characters on the Indo-Pacific theater with 20 nuclear missiles augmented by hypersonics blew its place and now feels that risk uncertainty created the U.S. decision calculated to deterrence posture U.S. hypersonics enhanced nuclear deterrent not providing prior to nuclear gap periods the Russian field against Ukraine the CM carried nuclear warhead China now target based in the island chain 3RC the paradox displayed hypersonics low range of reports indicate deployment and no coding Iran and nuclear vision for catastrophic asymmetry jeopardizes U.S. deterrence and fielding and hypersonics is necessary cannot be trusted with subsonic weapons Pebble is key one supply and alone has nearly half of U.S. supply masses 20 Pebble to receive uranium supply confirms substantial quantities premium strategic metal the U.S. rights of foreign producers Pebble goes long way to filling gap current resources for the U.S. are 5 million Pebbles represents 84% increase in U.S. imported 39,082% of demand it's expected to grow primary source of the mines of Pebble as a significant deposit of U.S. oil Pebble materially advanced self-sufficiency 2 refinement Alaska positioning ski PW20 concentrate would help to Asian markets and refining you can't find a better spot nowhere but close to the Tidewater view which gives access to shipment and Asian smelters provide easy access if U.S. wanted Alaska source we have to buy refined product from places like Japan which have refining capacity yet the U.S. lacks reversing illegal veto on the sole federal permanent scheme Miller with 16 the sole federal permanent and determined jurisdiction of the EPA holds over navigable waters Pebble line that's a jurisdiction of section 443 emphasizes authorized the EPA to prohibit never authority veto for small protection EPA that's never prohibited before operations even applied Pebble would be the first EPA's action to be on federal overreach PLAC injunction and the PLA's best change to the mining its mining is to prohibit the EPA's preemptive veto to promote permit application thus the plan the United States federal government should significantly increase its development of Arctic uranium the development of the Pebble mine make sure the plan is right to me advantage to its overreach Trump is defending the EPA section 440C veto of the Pebble mine EELP 2023 EPA issued a determination under 440C the block the Pebble litigation is ongoing under Trump the EPA withdrew determination however Army Corps declined to discharge the permit 2025 and Trump announced it will defend the decision to reject the permit EPA's final determination report the veto sets a precedent for federal overreach that hinders cooperative federalism in Alaska Taylor 22 veto with the Pebble mine may not proceed the CBDA and vision cooperative federalism and the resources of the Fed must play a supportive role and CBDA protects primacy responsibility of states the plan development region 10 must interpret the 440C that avoids intrusion veto fails the partnership as combative use serves the state's role and the court's station on the course the problem the court denied Alaska to participate in the appeal walling off Alaska does not reflect the partnership it's a critical case that will curb EPA's aggrandizement Taylor 22 infirmaries yet faces scrutiny while Congress enacts laws agencies give effect to every word that Congress has any adverse effect result in EPA under required can only reverse regulations allow veto to make a lower report finding agency not rewrite the statutory terms of decision significance respond to the danger of the advantated and the agency must point to a clear congressional authorization to veto present courts an opportunity to employ the doctrine limit EPA the power to retracts their aggregation of power districts the awards of fisheries doctrine there's granting the EPA power falls far short of the clear statement of region 10 as risk holding the upholding judicial scrutiny overreach particularly like in Alaska which had 23 lawsuit has best chance that the states will secure rights against self-governing EP bypass the regular state and federal permitting if the EPA do this Alaska you can do it anywhere Fed is becoming accustomed to middling Alaska is responsible to the states resources bureaucrats and DC are exercising unbridled power to choke off decision EPA march into factory creation of national park wars abuse in Alaska happen under the auspices of federal mining Alaska should not be unilaterally selling Alaska as an abroad smart government requirements Congress intend Alaska the primary responsibility decisions under proper federalism Alaska's Title 16 will ensure conservation aid SCNC ILE thought Alaska the responsibility change to resources the EP cannot ignore that Congress is what the court agreed EPA oversight authority and time will tell CWA implementation safeguards water and fish supplies that relies on proper state section 404 use that preserves cooperative federalism. Murphy 23. Fisheries manufactured depend on clean water-based fish rely on streams and spawning grounds for stable pollution, degradation, and impacts the health of supplies, economies, and habitat stability is vital for fishable waters. The regulatory framework found in no cooperative federalism. Section 4 establishes the program to minimize harm for mining and development for water resource transportation for overseas the oversight of laws. The resort of grant EPA authority denied the use 14. The only use for 14 projects, 42 permitted. The established permit for discharging for 1 is supported under Friday framework for states that work cooperatively. The state critical for its states for the body authority to review and impose conditions. Local Alaskan fish shortages cause U.S. Russia war. Evans 21. The ice and climate altering maritime resources bearing Sea significant attention. Home is the world's largest fishing theater. U.S. Russia competition despite commercialization trends suggest that sensitive fisheries are eventually the Bering Sea that has for prompting changes for the Bering Sea world for posturing the military and NATO and Russia showcase capabilities to its courageous entangled in domestic policies. The clean water shields against disease outbreaks. Eckenberger 21. COVID reduces attention to water sanitation to protect health access, reduces transmission facility, hand washing, and reducing your wastewater limiting assets contributes to higher risk of infection and access to clean water. Challenged by the utilities systems in cold region, permafrost instability, high cost of waterborne diseases due to region of water lack of sanitation, impose infection and risk of the via water and aerosol water rationing of limited basic precautions for other pathogens considering for the unique challenges faced by Alaska in effort to enhance and access needs to be renewed by federal state levels. The threat of operations very high for consequences can be far reaching that causes nuclear war. Taylor 23 consistent focus on direct pathways and indirect risks may be concerned posing 20 specimens to meet dry pieces not the case. 23 indicators across 3 domains of regional conflicts Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Indo-Pac, and Syria pandemics were likely to aggravate conflicts and reducing them exacerbated root causes food insecurity, debt, poverty. Conflict contribute to extra scapegoating of conflicts much more likely to collab. We survive social distancing, collide challenge communities, authoritarian jobs, restrict collab, Alaskan flexibility, solves the fuel with existential risk. Fisher 24, Alaska's 1/5 of the 48 constitution maximizes self-governance, emergency, and dedicated highly centralized Alaska from military disasters due to geography and difficulties of widespread motor infrared coordination, reduce the susceptibility of Alaska geographically generated and support long time before the Fed. The right from across our unique collapse, moving forward from the ground disintegrates the risk of the greatest in Alaska when the Arctic is most actively active regions that are large societal losses imperative that Alaska fair for the estimates of risk coastline and subject to flooding with threats and that infrared permafrost interacts with the flooding and athletic feedback loop of oil spills in the maritime state contains surface. There's been hazards of substances potential for catastrophic danger of loss of oil spill, terrorism, inclusive the RNRE theft, cyber threats, and environmental responsibility based on predication the absence of historical and stated the vulnerable future events and fish processing communities have a bulk fueled for the nuclear war. However, not all weapons are dismantled. No go for such an emerging threat. Alaska home military restoration, the oil fishing based by the base of terrorism, cyber incident, regional coordination, and erosion harm crime nation states. The common disrupt function of governance, cascaded nation beyond the sector of all location. Alaska dependency on networking and the risk of remote location requires coordinated state. The response to pandemics and local. The Fed first provides support local. As the best to manage regulatory and oversight and fulfill mutual cooperation. The Fed is support, not substitute. Terrorism causes dictation towards 21. Afghanistan fuels wars about Al-Qaeda not making a comeback. Emerging text and cyber and AI pose unprecedented power in the hands of terrorists. Added to the fantasized battle weaponizing plague and power to accessibility to duly sector 1. The threat of civilization will humanization higher and then ever before civilization of or critical infrastructure cause dictation. 15 risk threatened human civilization become more vulnerable when connected to a reinforcing risk that goes right to spill over TI and it creates independent networks that depend on each other. Mark each other.
Good.
Yes.
What countries' Asian markets does the plan access?
I think it's, Asian markets that are currently producing rhenium are places like Japan, I think is the main place.
Only Japan?
China.
Likely Japan and South Korea would be places that are refining the U.S.
Okay.
metals. Yeah.
Why does strengthening Alaska's right to not get vetoed by the EPA stop terrorism, critical infrastructure attacks, etc.?
Well, so the internal link is broader decentralization and cooperative federalism. So we've read a piece of spillover evidence that says, the Taylor card says that if the EPA can do this here, they can do it anywhere. So essentially, if the EPA can override state authority to build a mine, to extract minerals, do other things environmentally, we think that upends the broader Clean Water Act's basis on cooperative federalism.
What is the mandate of the plan then?
Well, the mandate of the plan is the district courts to, overrule the veto that the EPA has on the Pebble Mine.
They overrule the veto?
Yeah.
So only on district level, how does it solve for broad court
Well,
process?
because it's the Federal District Court of Alaska, which is the one that has authority for the Pebble Mine, because the Pebble Mine is in Alaska.
Okay, disease, how does the app solve for unclean water outside of Alaska?
Well, a couple of things. We've read internal links about Alaska and Alaskan fisheries. So our primary internal link is about diseases that spread from the Arctic. As per broader diseases, we think that Alaska is uniquely vulnerable, right? Like, our evidence, the Fisher card says they lack infrastructure, they're geographically isolated, which means they're much more likely to
Wait,
have
if they're
diseases
geographically
spread out
isolated,
there.
how can disease spread outside the Arctic?
Well, obviously they're not entirely isolated, but our point is that they lack infrastructure to be able to respond to diseases quickly. So they can still spread via things like shipping and other, commerce.
And what about
out
the
of
plan
Alaska.
means that they get more infrastructure to respond to diseases?
Well, the Clean Water Act. So we think that it allows for more cooperative federalism and quick response to, cleaning water, making sure there's not pathogens that are infecting local drinking water sources in Alaska, all those sorts of things.
Okay, what adversaries attacked the U.S.?
China, Russia, North Korea, Iran.
Like, what's the incentive?
Well, the U.S., it's a deterrence internally, so our hypersonic scenario is about other adversaries developing hypersonic capabilities. They think that they can overtake U.S. power, and that U.S. deterrence is weakening because of their lack of hypersonic capabilities. So we think that that would cause escalation.
So, adversary hits the U.S., U.S. strikes them back, then we're all dead. What's the incentive there?
Well, like, obviously they don't think they're gonna die. Like, they're not suicidal, but, like, they think they will win the war against the U.S. because they have hypersonic capabilities and the U.S. won't. We think this war would go nuclear.
Why doesn't other technologies like AI, drones, also apply to this? Because it's about whether or not
Also
they think they can beat
apply?
the U.S. Yeah.
Like we think, like, those technologies are inevitable on all sides. Like, both sides have drones, both sides have AI.
How does the app
I think that
stop them from
hypersonics are
developing?
unique because hypersonics are a U.S. vulnerability because of our constrained radium supply, which is necessary for coolant mechanisms.
But they still develop it post-plan.
The U.S.
Well,
I don't
Alpha
know.
adversaries.
Okay. The 1NC is sent. The order will be 7 off, supply, overreach.
Russia only.
Does everyone have the 1NC?
Yep.
Cool.
I just got it, Russell.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Awesome. If there are no objections, I shall begin. The first office T, Arctic. The Arctic refers to only the region 66.5 degrees north of the equator. National Geographic 23. Arctic northernmost region of the Earth is defined. Arctic, the area within the Arctic Circle, latitude 66.5 degrees north of the equator. Scandinavia, Russia, Canada, Greenland, U.S. state of Alaska. Violation. The Pebble Mine is 200 miles south of Anchorage. Northern Dynasty Minerals, Pebble Project located 200 miles south of Anchorage. That's not in the Arctic, by the way. Arctic Gateway, 20. Rejected team. 1 limits allowing the app to develop outside the Arctic. Justifies literally any possible actor or the place which is close to top to making NAGPRAC impossible. 2. Ground allowing development outside the Arctic hills. Arctic-based sets and counterplans. It's wholly limited on topic of exploration development. Mean and nothing. Alaska counterplan. Alaska should seemingly increase its development of the Pebble Mine and finance by establishing anti-recession budget reform initiatives backed by state reserve banks. Alaska solves, the Fed follows on. AF-22. Alaska has the ability to create policies that can expand Alaska's Arctic role. Also changes policy with the result of bipartisan efforts creates actionable Arctic policy and positively influencing federal policy. Budget reform stalls funding issues. And below 9 promotes an anti-recession budget reform initiative amend PPP to allow a deficit for purposes of funding programs. State push for creation of reserve bank state charters. Public bank as well as the bank circulates dollars and perfectly constitutional, allowing states to borrow money instead of spend. Next off is Cap K. Arctic resource extraction solely benefits corporate elites at the expense of the socio-environment. Malik and 424. Arctic active economies benefit stakeholders and investors while just human needs barely affect undermined by extract activities, resulting in displacement, irreversible environmental damage, the continuation of colonialism, capital is unsustainable and causes extinction. Ramesh 25. Innovation contribute to climate crisis and existential threat. Fossil fuels driver climate change emissions increase. AWS outpace regulatory frameworks for climate change. Existential scientific consensus reflected in IPCC. Quantum leading to breaches, quantum prize, everything. Governance outstrip capacity. Extinction rises super intelligent lead catastrophic outcomes. Environmental cost of tech energy intensive data centers and extraction post sustainability challenge frameworks lag behind, leaving gaps in regs. The alternative is eco-socialism. Works on Harris 24. Eco-socialism, environmentally sustainable order, repudiates growth-oriented needs, food, work, equality, purchase-oriented democracy, better needs rather than profits. Essential to adaptation, man planning, social society, speed, democratic exploitation, would be prevented. Next off is the restrict counterplan. The United States federal government should restrict the Environmental Protection Agency Section 404C authority to post permitting only that solves advantage 2 and only relies on closing the legal loophole created by 404C. Next off is export controls DA. Trump and Xi have reached a deal on REM restrictions now, but it's fragile. Letter inshallah 25. Agreement that Trump reaches to de-escalate trade war, including tariff reductions and pause and restriction REM. The words 100% tariff extends to delicate trade truce pause on export controls. China agreed to also issue general licenses on exports amounted to de facto removal of controls April 20 and October. China agreed to suspend all retaliatory tariffs, also removed all tariffs. Canada versus US agreed to 1 year pause on blacklist. Pebble Mine is needed to create domestic rare earth supplies. Neuron 26, like expansion of rare earths that deposits like pebbles, scope of efforts to secure domestic supply. Attempts at new REM supply chains backfire and trigger retaliatory export controls. Kobayashi 25, China implemented export restrictions here. Earth extended military equipment. China dominates the market for mining and refining. Restrictions based on overwhelming dominance in the international market. 48.9% of rare earth distributed in China refining market dominance more pronounced. Over 90% world most rely on Chinese refining to utilize heavy rare earths. Imposed export restrictions. The issue of refining is not solved. U.S. provides rare earths exports almost all to China. Export controls ignites U.S.-China trade war. Alliance 25 suspend rare earth export controls. Give companies some breathing room. Reduce the pressure on the negotiating table. Agree on a Trump truce before Trump responded to export controls. 100% import duty on Chinese goods. That triggers existential conflict. Boot 25. Trump trade war against China. Escalated tariffs. Do you respond to global tariffs remain in place, making a recession likely? Raises all the scenario. Global depression and actual war. History is replete with trade turning into shooting wars. Anglo-Dutch and naval wars. World War I. Pearl Harbor trade war between U.S. and China and a nuclear war. Chinese cheating, threatening tariffs. China responds blocking U.S. exports, selling $1 trillion in treasuries. President escalates conflict. Escalates China malware. Leads the stock market crashes. The American president dispatches a drone to attack China's NSA. China detects attack, retaliates, launching missiles today. The U.S. airbase. The Ellis worst case tariffs only 50%. And China has their incentives to expand. Rage responses beyond terror. Unprecedented crisis attraction because Alex is related to war. Russian actors allowed to continue national honors arouse war. Those of our greater told than anticipated watching and Beijing compelled to feel going. Next topic is politics. Yay. Or go to Putin.
Yeah.
Next topic is Putin. Putin's regime is on the. Wait, no. Go to politics. ACA subsidies, exceptional passing out last. But Trump's PC is key. Garrett 26 bipartisan senators work to compromise on resurrect ACA credits. That's a common ground, but it's a doable thing. Legislation is only doable with Trump's blessing because he has influence over the majority. Just the jump in prices will break the logjam in Congress. Mark at Congress. Large policy drains political capital. Burger can Princess 18. The Arctic Chumba starts leadership big ideas to advance America's interest in the Arctic. Our longer-term efforts to tackle the heavy price tag and political capital for its administration. Congress to prioritize Arctic. PC is real and flips votes. Hold 25 research on the president's influence. Argues significant influence over the congressional agenda. How the president packages different legislative stacks. There's some limits made. If it was getting things done on the legislative agenda, the president must be strategic in to getting it passed. Ready if president set the agenda. Failure to extend subsidies causes pandemics. Segment 25. Insurance subsidies. More than 21 million people are enrolled. More insured patients lead higher, causing a decline. Public health prevention preparedness responses to people seeking care because of early identification of infectious disease outbreaks, which might lead to pandemics, especially in rural areas where there's greater interference between humans. ACA is life or death. Supply chains or supply advantage. 1. Other chains develop hypersonic weaponry now. 2. Hypersonics fail, easily targetable, overhyped, and increase international conflict. Right in Tracy 24. Hypersonics are not stealthy, they must be launched over large booster satellites able to detect launch. So weapons become visible. Hypersonics have the ability to maneuver and change trajectories with increased drag and reduce speed and range drawbacks. Limit maneuvering. Russia and China stepped up hypersonic development due to U.S. interest. U.S. can build hypersonics issues whether weapons make any military tests that claims driving, setting without enhancing security. 3. No sovereignty. Processing of mineral contractions moves supply chains directly to other countries and out of U.S. hands. Want to see W20 inserted below. 4. Ukraine constrains Russian capabilities. 5. Russia isn't revisionist. Week 24. Moscow's behavior is because of realism, limited goals, NATO expansionism, precipitated conflict. Russian interventions are maintenance rather than expansion. Military response efforts to bring Georgia into NATO. Once Moscow achieved its goal, Moscow intended itself with prohibiting conflict characteristics of a slow power. Russia received lose military resources from Crimea. Annexation followed. Russian intervention. Ukraine centered on maintaining resources. Russia is not revisionist. Russia intervention ended once Moscow prevented any changes in international order. 6. China isn't revisionist. Vote 24. Analysts consider China's threat. China has not promoted socialist values abroad. Has not been involved in any wars since 1979, not supplied aid to Russia and Ukraine. China upholds its goal to join all international institutions established by the U.S. led West as a sole top trader. China is deeply embedded in existing order, which is a safeguard that system. China remains in robust ties with the West. China shifts serves reform rather than replace order, making it more equitable with U.S. allies. Leave China as the largest trading partner. 7. COVID dump supply chains. Good overreach. 1. No warrant for Alaskan State Authority key. 404C still solves any risk of their scenarios, regardless of the plan. 2. Want to see Evans directs close U.S. shore, only says competition. 3. Fisheries are sustainable now. Vendors 21. Most valuable fisheries are healthy, good, sustainable management being achieved. Harvest held steady, but high seas fishing only 6% of global fish catch. Regional management watch over catches, techniques in the game, track fishing vessels via satellite. Triple number of boardings and government subsidies without these 50% of fishing become unprofitable. 4. Fish wars are high. PSA 18. Relation between food and the public is simplistic. Given those days uphold sovereignty, it is difficult to imagine fish escalate. 5. All causes of disease spread, airborne and other contagious pathogens. 6. 0 waterborne diseases outlined by the AF. 7. Trump makes clean water solvency impossible. 24. Trump leads to notable shift in water policy, steering away from sustainability by prioritizing economic growth over environmental protections. Zelda known for potential global key water policies. Trump prioritizes deregulation, shift in financial responsibilities, expected to reduce the scope for federal politics. Focus on sustainability. U.S. water quality standards lead to reduce oversight, increasing exposure to contaminants. 8. Plan only solves clean water in Alaska. Every other region and country is an all cause. 9. Black plague influenza and COVID dump pandemics. 10. No disease impact. 23. Pandemics on existential humanity can survive. Likely most groups isolated remain unaffected. Have greater resistance, sanitation, advancements, medicine, reduce transmission to medical systems, has the capacity to mitigate terminal spread. 11. Lacks of flexibility, can't sell broadly, no solvency. For emergencies in other parts of the U.S. 12. Can't sell terrorism broadly, no silver claim. For preventing terrorism in Alaska. 13. No reason for terrorist attacks. We get new answers when they say who attacks and why. 14. The impact of terrorism is small and they won't go nuclear. Nuclear. 21. 9/11 that is an extreme outlier. Nuclear terrorist warning has been proven to be empty. No one has gotten anywhere near that. It requires trusting corrupted foreign collaborators, attending and transporting highly guarded material and rolling untested to finish routing any position while attracting no attention nor have terrorists use some naval steel. Nuclear weapons terrorists between the rainfall and competence support. 15, no grid impacts. Number 23, the grid is extremely reliable. Whether it become considerations for planners. The planners avoid any duration outage. Terrorism become harder. We don't need long outages. This is allow U.S. to recover quickly. Mark out quickly. 16, no warrant for who attacks and why on infrastructure. We get answers when they clarify. 17, not PETA and SolarWinds thumb. 18, appears proof they won't escalate. Insert the list below. That's CSI 14. Good for us.
The restrict counterplan restricts the EPA's broad authority for Section 4.4C vetoes. Why is that not Plan Plus?
Rishi?
Well, the plan would mandate the reopening of the Pebble Mine as a result of the district court overruling this.
Well, right. It restricts the EPA's authority on one case of a 4.4C veto. The counterplan does all 4.4C vetoes. So, like, again, why is that not Plan Plus?
Well, no, the plan says that you do the Pebble Mine, you reopen it as a result of the court case being vetoed.
Yeah.
The counterplan does
Result
not.
the overturn the veto.
The counterplan does not reopen the Pebble Mine though. We just overturn it or restrict the authority to use the veto.
Wait, but by restricting the veto, you allow the mine being opened. So it's like
Well, no, we're not overturning the court precedent. We're just restricting their ability to veto.
So it's like different actor who does the counterplan.
I guess so. Yeah.
So who would restrict it?
Well, I guess Congress can restrict the president's authority to veto, or like executive authority to veto.
Okay. The Alaska counterplan. So, federal government via the EPA, like as we've established, has banned Pebble Mine being developed. How does the counterplan solve?
Rishi? Well, it's a district court level thing inside Alaska. The Alaska
A
district.
federal district court.
Okay, even if that's true, Alaska can still open the mine and then say the veto's bad. We can
Oh, I mean,
combine this with the
But like
restrict
Alaska, it's illegal for Alaska to do it. So like, do they just like ignore the federal government, or like how does that work?
I suppose so.
Okay. Status.
The status quo is a logical policy option.
Net benefits.
Net benefit to Alaska is politics. Net benefit to restrict counterplan is export controls.
Okay. So export controls DA, the Kobayashi card says like attempts at new REM supply chains backfire. The first line of the card says China has implemented export restrictions on 7 rare earths. None of those were rhenium because China doesn't have any rhenium. What is the link?
The link is to REM supply chains. The Rowan evidence specifically says that Pebble Mine is key to other REMs besides just rhenium.
Oh, it's where does it say that?
It says expansion, rare earths, deposits like Pebble, scope of effort, secure domestic supply, and we also think about rhenium as well.
None of this even lists what rare earths.
It says copper.
The line you highlighted says it extends beyond.
Wait, I'm looking at this Rowan evidence. It specifically does talk about rhenium, copper, and silver.
Yeah. The first line of the card.
The first card.
The Rowan evidence.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm asking about the Kobayashi card.
Okay.
Why is rhenium key?
Again, so rhenium is still an area where China has authority right now, with the plan to overturn that. But
right,
independently,
this
there's
card
other
says that
REMs.
it has 7 other export controls on other minerals.
Well, this is actually pre the new deal that has come out, where they've lifted those export restrictions because now they know they have a stable advantage in all of those.
Okay, but so again, like, why didn't that then cause the trade war? Or like
because they've been negotiated down now, but the plan is a bolt from the blue that signals that the U.S. is now willing to break China's monopoly, which triggers retaliation.
Let me know when everyone's good for it.
I am good.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm good for the order.
So supply advantage, overreach advantage, T Arctic, the capped K, the restrict counterplan, the Alaska counterplan, the Putin DA, the export controls DA, and the ACA DA.
Can you give that one more time?
Supply advantage, overreach advantage, T Arctic, cap K, restrict counterplan, Alaska, Putin,
export controls, and ACA.
Second for y'all read everything.
Hmm?
Y'all read
We did not read Russia
Okay, yeah.
and some
Who did
questions.
that?
Yeah, obviously it is.
Cool.
Food.
Um,
Not big enough.
Wait, it's the same order, but not.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Cool. Everyone ready? Awesome.
One is number 1, other supply chains are solved by the U.S. exporting to allies and domestic reprocessing, which I'll do below. One is number 2 was hypersonic bad. They prepared focus in 19 if one gets these associated with the tech, versus the first not apparently limited war, nuclear exchange matter. They got the relationship person matter, escalation of possibility, reforce to the war, nuclear, the hypersonic, stabilizing secondary, the South Hypersonic person, the list is a co-border, comparison, explanation, FRB, hypersonic, increased priority make, Dutch credible offset BMD, and offer restricted compared to ICBM. They are better for de-escalation to reduce stability metrics, indicates weapons to stabilize majority, counter value, counter force against other dimensions. Insurance is not directed to avoiding any exchange budget or war, and civilization will cost counter force and positive impact MAD. Deterrence is unique. States believe a relationship is stable with its counter force. It's stabilizing because powers believe it is failure to live. To understand the goal of deterrence, any control before parity could not be possible. Chinese Russia would not agree to being inferior. Committee parity ship or parity to supremacy and stabilized powers should welcome this. So now, one is number 3. We do solve because allies will upgrade their capabilities in the future, which solves any tech barriers in company entry, but domestic refinement solves. Number 2, offshoring heavy center focus restart. Mineral production, domestic industry decline following decrease. Government processing after end of Cold War. Offshoring industry new processing off to global producers. Now, one is number 4. Ukraine doesn't do hypersonic modernization. Is a question of nuclear stability, not just Russian aggression broadly. One is number 5 and 6, where Russian revisionism McCain is about Ukraine broadly. That cannot explain the invasion of Moldova and Georgia, where Russia was aggressive despite NATO being weaker in the first place. Both cannot explain intrusions in Taiwan and China's nuclear modernization. One is number 7. COVID doesn't apply to REMs, which is distinct. Advantage 2. One is number 1, Alaska certainly is the most vulnerable spot on the United States where there is a lack of defense against all those impacts in the status quo. One is number 2, yes, competition. Nemesis says that it goes nuclear because of Russia and U.S. miscalculation. As I said, competition is at all-time high since the Cold War. One is number 3, this card is from 2021. That does not assume current federal reach against the EPA, which collapsing fish stocks in the status quo. One is number 4, fish wars are not high. Evans cites data and says that the U.S. and Russia tensions are empirically increasing. One is number 5, no all causes disease. Everywhere else is sanitized except for Alaska, so it's a unique vector for spread. One is number 6, yes, in fact it does spread globally. The bomb says that knock-over effects cause civilization. Ultimately, geoengineering triggers nuclear conflict. One is number 7. Trump doesn't matter. It's not a question of Trump, but rather a question of Alaska's resilience. One is number 8. Alaska is a key one really done above. One is number 9. COVID does not thump its unique now bomb. It's from 2023 and says that new pandemics are uniquely worse. One is number 10. Disease defense was sensible. One is number 11. Alaska is the vulnerability. One is number 12. What's done above. Weekend U.S. when they give new warrants. One is number 13. Yes, motives. Courses that radicalization in Boko Haram and climate change is driving terrorist motives in the status quo. One is number 14. Yes, impact is unique. Done above. One is number 15, yes, grid impact Hamlin. They don't assume slower effect. Hamlin says that climate change and other effects will knock down the grid, which causes civilization collapse. One in terms of 16. Its adversaries attacking, which Taurus explicitly lists out. One is 17 net payout. It wasn't a large-scale target, so it didn't matter. What would mean atextually, plain text vacuum is key to objectivity, positionality, green light, some people pick key functionally impediment, could reach into the object 2 counter it includes Alaska AB, hear about the idea of Chevron's uses dimension phrases of options after that, encompasses all Alaska, Canadian growth, Greenland, Faroe Island, North Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Prefer a precision. We cite the most used definition, plain meaning best, for controversial subjective terms, otherwise counter to or AFE ground. The southern area of Alaska is the only area with unique geography for mineral shafts. They're not thumbed by Trump and can generate good U.S. key warrants. 3 functional limits, military research, politics, usher ground around states, international, non-arctic, cannibal, check for gap, 4 reasonability, competing in terms of cost, substance, crowd out.
Strike context vacuum.
Strike context vacuum. Cap K. 1. Framework value fiat applied to ability against unique things and functionally competitive recorders, particularly skin and fairness and clash rates only intrinsic impacts, 2 cases outweighs 16 trip. Workloads alternative 3 do both, which you plan abandoning every other instance. 4 links are 8 on unique capitalism. Not construction and success grow. IMF, WTO, Trump some OIA. B. The pebble protects the environment, which solves 5 growth stable. Number 3 material. Use decrease 3 survey. The content by population increase emission decrease. Possible 40% no longer relative absolute coupling comprehension. Pricing. Revolution as green tech opportunities to recycle account. After reaching account more uses of green tech from your activity. Reduces forward strongly correlated with wealth. Mark the card at wealth. Enable state call extinction settlement before NASA. But every measure functional current companies spot. United States says that WEF can grow 1.8 trillion 2,000 unique companies. National relief extinction, not weather one. Settlements insurance against extinction toward interbalance stabilization supply elements 2. Reduce cost of return wealth. Reduce gravity innovation solution. Address obstacles. Mark the card at obstacles. Strike laundry list. They don't have a warrant for extinction. The alt fails. The case is a disab because it holds resource extraction necessary to outrage adversaries, which are revisionist. If not, reject floating picks because move the case and delete deficit. B. A cost transition war. Sparring average zero regression. Reject in private actor international fiat testing institutional feasibility. Destroy social controversy. Restrict Canada. 1. Do the Canada. You haven't defined what development is, which justifies you one of your answers. 2. Can't solve advantage to either. Alaska's wish was to expand the mind, so the Canada is by definition federal intrusion by denying their permits. 3. Permutation to evolve the shield because the plan is seen as well on 4 links to the epiphany because China will be perceiving it the exact same way. Alaska. 1. Permutation to evolve. It's seen as follow on. It links to politics because it's perceived by Congress. 2. They cannot solve a supply. Federal permits override state 1 says it's Brexit. EPA's authority prevents Alaska undermining
reclaiming land that's Miller beat overreached based on federal support decision, which states cannot control that sailor. Due to the caveat in the plan, sequencing is not intrinsic. Show does not immediately grounding aid. Show consider possible to men. Prefer predictability. Definition is not grounding. The stable system are worthless. 4. Reject non-use of fiat. It's not a logical opportunity cost plan. And a similarly so to the world peace kind of plan. No follow on level 2 to 3 BCC precedent. Or the other low cost whether the peace with the legal rights specific rights to a specific section would not be controlled by general and next figure. And the best of the specific general rule. Court reason permitting more specific reason for question more specific loot. Such a Alaska, for Alaska, which is not to treatment. Disorder the analysis. Conduit of history to is the offenses incentivizes nuance research. You have no cost unique is kind of dismal solves preserves ground. Allows strict terms we don't read personal theory, export control, non-union, mineral supply sound. Because you think about companies who exo jumps on mineral protection, retain control, or supply chains for copper, lithium, cobalt. Deal with DRC, which holds 70% cobalt, run electric more one. Run the around trilogy metals backward, manufacturing Alaska, deal with factor passing Nevada. 7 other rare earth, which obviously thumb that's classic. Kobayashi is primarily about lithium that's high now. Ross 12, 30 countries on working with the largest lithium deposit over 50 years. 1.5 trillion, 40 million tons of lithium investors are confident demand won't dip. Red Dog Mine and Embler Road obviously thought legitimacy resilience of 21 seems to be maintained. Power for 7 decades survived crisis in the 90s. In aftermath, they have been demonstrating civil resilience from making up. Party gets credit for law and order. China has one in the power of nature. So Moscow so we get digital. That's all that regular mystery when Chinese have about competition most remain supportive. Now growth, Chinese declining growth doesn't cause war, to the Chinese economy failing. Recovering GDP growth on the 5%. FDI dropping the crisis, negative impact support. AWS reduction more investment in obvious sexual country privatization, improved relation China has maintained human ties, turned down rhetoric against the West, Islamic creative states cooperation. This that is incoherent because the arms sales to Taiwan obviously thumb and it's a bigger signal than the ECA. 1 of Venezuela and shutdown stop. Ferris 1 5 Charles already said to return to a bit of rights and the shutdown law because Arthur between always said the web and better Johnson. Nothing will be forced to answer over the two has certain relationship warning he sent it to more power because one period we make a lot of resolution for this week. 2 lower court shield sent to help actually spare 3 no ruling effect on Jimmy was not a bad. Obviously legitimacy courts by legitimacy petition judicial privilege like about the Congress while judicial personally political judicial preclude appearances on the news. Trump is kicking out you just credits to introduce reform constitutional legislation all new. Trump's citizen control to pay a major role. He has influence over Republican majority. He isn't engaging with the 16 of the official really should produce against people of the massive federal tax spread. Trying to introduce the White House if we update their lady justice through. I know the Octas, there's zero in time the absolute political capital and their evidence says that it's generally true not in the context of the Arctic or Pebble. So we get new answers. The app solves disease. Alaska is the vulnerability. Back on case. Adversaries are revisionists.
Go back to the trade.
Wait, what?
Trade.
No trade impact 2022. Trade not enough to extend the peace. Then fix itself benefits trade in U.S. China was just 1.2% GDP gains from a war larger than trade by terrorism. The South African was influence for the month of U.S. and Russia. Russian natural gas source extension between countries. Trade was super high after World War I. This trade GDP. Russian international war to still. And it's done by obviously done by past trade failures. Back on case. Adversaries are revisionists that frames the term of History 5. Competition dominates how the cell between the US, China, Russia funded the active government of China. Grasp of hedging Africa, Mid East, to control Hong Kong, Taiwan. Strategic plan out of US PRC determined on forces take active role globally. Growth equaling America of 2035 euros to turn fixed cash for news. SES took on important silence was refused. Arbitration with Central Taiwan, Sheepo, Kim, unification, LPI. With security relation of fair trade weekend. Supply chain COVID-19, establishment and dual space orders for power relations with Russia low. Cisco world life restrictions are liquid to the European Cordial. That's what I call for. Much more zero sub European restriction on Ukraine. Control members tonight was the Institute of Russia access to office to listeners. Liberal national the Central East. Moscow further on the control of members of the ship in Washington into a reference of history preparation about that. Other theory against realist little predictions. Mark the card at predictions on the bottom. I'm good for cross.
Cool. Let's start with this domestic refinement card on case.
Yeah.
This card seems to be saying that the U.S. has made attempts to create refinement. Where do you think it conclusively says the U.S. can refine things itself?
We think that in the near future, the U.S. has the capabilities as well as the House.
So they don't have capabilities right now, correct? But they're building ones.
Well, yeah, we think that building will complete relatively soon, and that will allow the U.S. to
Really,
refine.
most refinement facilities take like multiple decades to construct. How would this be soon?
Well, okay, so a couple of things. One, we think there exists some refining capacity now. Second, we think that increasing refinement would send a signal to adversaries that the U.S. is capable of manufacturing hypersonic weapons. And we think that even if allies currently don't have enough investors, we think that companies would shift there if more uranium is mined per when I see some of the evidence.
Sure. Let's talk about this counterinterpretation on T Arctic. Why is this most predictable?
Why is this most predictable? Several things. One is from the AHDR, which is the most commonly used definition. Our argument is that the Arctic has been very controversial over multiple literature bases. There are many ways people define it in different contexts. We think ours is the most commonly used.
Actually, I don't think you've read any of those cards about there being multiple definitions of the Arctic, correct?
Right, like, we can make that argument in the 1AR if you say, like, yours
So wait, the argument wasn't in the 2AC, but you get it new in the 1AR?
It's an extension of reasonability. Our argument is, like, our argument, the AP25 cards...
Oh, why is that an extension of reasonability?
Because our argument is that there isn't one perfect,
But you never said that in the 2AC, correct?
Yeah.
like, the 1NC was 5 seconds. Come on.
It was not. Okay. Let's go to reasons reject.
Reasons-
Kondo, all
yeah.
the K theory. What else?
Kondo, all the K theory, and I think non-US.
Oh, non-USFG?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's go to restrict counterplan.
Sure.
Counterplan does not result in the AF. How does this links net benefit argument make sense?
Because it would still mess with Pebble, which would be perceived by China in a similar
How would the
way.
counterplan still mess with Pebble?
Like, it would be EPA essentially affecting the same decision over, even if it's not a permit.
Well, it affects the same decision, correct? But it doesn't revive the mine,
It doesn't revive the mine.
which is what the links do.
It doesn't revive the mine. Other mines are being revived in the status quo. We think the counterplan doesn't really send a distinct signal than whatever the plan would create.
Okay, sure.
Because it's still a core ruling.
Let's talk about this.
China's not going to care about a district core ruling.
What's the warrant for the solvency deficit?
Warrant for the solvency deficit? Alaska was the one that applied, like, they wanted the permit to happen. The federal government opposing the permit would be like, here, Alaska, we actually don't care whatever you're thinking about. That is the opposite of cooperative federalism because it proves that the federal government is encroaching on Alaskan authority. So
Okay.
allowing the mine is key to send that signal of cooperative federalism and make the decision coherent, because that's the only way for, the federal government to be like, okay, we're actually letting you do your own stuff. We're not messing with you for whatever environment or other reasons.
Okay.
Okay.
Seven 7:43.
10:43.
Yeah. I'm sending it out, then I'm sending it over.
Alright.
Oh, actually, I'll wait for Whit.
I'm a good idea.
Pass we stand.
Yeah.
I want to do second one. I used to do third, but it was too high. Okay, we have 7:43 remaining.
and I just sent it. Is everybody good for an order?
I don't have the doc.
Yeah. The order is Hopicality Arctic.
Okay.
The restrict counterplan.
Okay.
Advantage 1 supply. Advantage 2 overreach.
Awesome.
I'm good.
So that's T counterplan or T restrict counterplan supply overreach. Panel good?
Leave the doc open.
Okay. Wait. Alright, perfect. The Arctic is the Arctic Circle, only reason to 66.5 degrees north of the equator. We meet at 0. Pebble Mine is south anchorage, was way outside the Arctic Circle. Presumption because all the something is about mining that takes place inside the Pebble Mine. Now, to counter fails, 2 decides 1 limits, they are weight. The interpret explicit topic, infant naps. The interpret cause says the definition is broad. Green lights, any act in Alaska. We can do trade regulation in obscure Alaskan cities. Means teams. It acts to non-Arctic regions and countries like Greenland, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, Iceland. Every app becomes a tiny multi-lat apps that does not impact the geopolitical situation in the Arctic. Any U.S. government policy about Alaska or these other countries become topical because lack space and development are meaningless. Hurts both sides. A, neg prep, huge topic. Because the neg prep burden untouchable, destroys research in class. B, laziness. That's the F off the hook with small unpredictable apps no lit, which ruins research. Now, 2, ground. Every court decide neg argument relies on impact of the Arctic. Environmental geopolitical situation. A, decides against military apps. They require military presence in the Arctic that would interact with adversarial foreign relations. The interpret allows apps that increase military infrastructure in regions of Alaska that are isolated from Arctic geopolitics, means they can no link Russia decide. Like this app, research decides will require uniqueness, which only our interpret allows. Non-Arctic resources in Alaska are being explored and developed now. The interpret means that any app that increases infrastructure or regulates current Alaskan oil and gas infrastructure under topical. That not only creates a whole new category of apps to prep against, but means this ads are not unique because the infrastructure is there now. B, complements. Complements attest Arctic key is the only functional limit on neg. Obviating definition Arctic kills the Alaska complement or the domestic complements gives the app new region keywords that make neg prep written untouchable. Neg ground out waste. Force the neg to go for process complements. Critiques still debates. After teams lose to any region setup and just right framework and confidence blocks. No new answers to 1 ER because the tourists is the only is the last app constructor, so they do not get to make new answers for anything else in the flow. Now, predictability, it is wrong. 1, debatability outweighs the most debate on term. Is key to accessing the better quality class research. If the most predictable interp means it makes the topic untenable and persistent becomes meaningless. 2, limits turn it and prepare is impossible. It does not matter what we can reasonably expect to prepare to go for. 3, we are not 0 sets of consensus among scientists independently. We access legal definitions because we cited the state of Alaska that draws a clear line between Arctic parts of state and non-Arctic parts of state. Evaluating the Arctic in geographic context as any region north of the Arctic Circle is the most predictable definition. Defer to scientific consensus. Coastal 24. The most context in the Arctic Circle and the Arctic Circle 66.5 degrees north. Other definitions exist based on temp and political boundaries. Prep is wrong. Team prepare reasonable interps. Now for slightly more predictable ones, and we should make the rest more debatable because it's poorly written now. After ground is wrong. 1, neg ground outweighs. They always have any prep less than neg ground. Cause composites count my pool of smaller and bigger topics. Smaller topics means more in-depth research, and they can check both sides. Neg research, neg strats must be refined, and after teams have reactionary prep that checks over-limiting. 2, try to die. Exploration and development have no meaning, they're only limited topic. It's how we define Arctic. 3, no link. Arctic is huge. It covers 4% of the Earth, and it has 8 countries part of it, and has enough infrastructure to access remote regions with all great ground. Independently, any remote region is Afghan under interpret P25 length Arctic Circle, 16,000 kilometers, 6,020 square kilometers, 4% Arctic surface, Arctic, and people, parts of Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, USA, Greenland, Iceland, Arctic Circle is across commercial aviation to move areas. For reference, it's more than double the size US CAC to by US land area. 9 million square kilometers. That's a percentage greater than that's a greater percentage of the Earth's surface than any country. Starting to reference WF 21 includes water and land, which doubles Afghan, long 19 Arctic, and within the area the Arctic Circle includes future waters. And then 4 Cutter sols, mind the Arctic Circle, sols all ground into one sea. Now functionalist nature destroys them. Core decides are predicated off of expedition development Arctic Circle, this is what I said IR decide, or military presence because the app does not have to posture Arctic, and penalty research does not lose their uniqueness because they can be Alaska or other non-Arctic states. We cannot cut Arctic key ones. That makes we can't test Arctic key ones, which makes app lazy. We unpack her in process comments, critiques, defense, and create still debates. We now decide to doing individual research, only small topic, and to us crafted case studies. Reachability. This was a blip in the I have no idea if Jimmy even said it or if it was flowable, so I use a second for flow. About creating terms is best. A, model comparison, only way it establishes desirable deviant norms, or assess reasonability in first place. B, judge and present, judge ideology. Over are debating integrity. C3, they're unreasonable. Limits exposed in some all topics Jason asked to prove. And TVA assaults, reasonability cannot be offense. If we prove the three rule, it will not happen. With the TVA, go to restrict kind of plan. The combat solves bench 2, restricts APS 30 and section 4C, which prevents future pre-permit stoppages of research projects, no reason, or public minded scheme. We only need to prevent future APA restrictions, which is what the entire bench is about. Trace 1, do the combat severs because it's different actor, that was one of the causes. Because the combat has Congress restrict the authority to veto by the EPA, it does not rewrite the mind, and the comment says that future vetoes cannot happen, but current vetoes are fine, which is the opposite, which is different than the plan's ruling, so it's different. We don't need to find development for this, that's above. Now, if we do solve bench 2, it gives future flexibility. There's no reason why Pebble Mind veto is key. The entire bench is our flexibility and spillover scheme. If we restrict the veto, that means they cannot restrict any other Clean Water Act authority later on, which solves the scenarios anyway. Now, do both links to export controls. As I said, links to that benefit is wrong because we do not reopen Pebble, which is what the link to it is as well. China does not perceive it the same way because we do not reopen REM supply chain, so they don't perceive it as that. Now, actually, go to export controls real quick. Sorry. I'm going to read the uniqueness comment here. Constituency is a constructive United States federal government to appeal prohibit executive orders meant to jumpstart critical mineral production. It justified neglects cosplay counterintuitive. Constituency is constructive, so it's illogical. Go to supply. Hypersonics do not make sense. It gets developed in other countries regardless of the app. It's about adversaries, not allies. Adversaries will still develop hypersonics and engage in reciprocal arms race within the app. So even if the app develops some hypersonics, adversaries will just get better hypersonics anyway, which fixes the app. Now, the second argument was not that hypersonics are bad, it's that they fail, which is Jacques Warren. Satellites and detect launches, regardless, means they cannot change the trajectory, and any slight disturbance in launch makes the hypersonic VR course, means that even if the US does develop hypersonics, they cannot be detected in time, and they do get detected. So the adversary knows that they're confident in the status quo, and also post plans. So the AF cannot solve the turrets. Now, the AF cannot solve the turrets. Now, Russia, they're not resist. They only seek to maintain paranoid reason. All empirics defense response to data expensive. That's McMahon. The empiric stuff is wrong. Our evidence is about empirics. It does explain Moldova, Georgia. It says that NATO was strong then, and they're getting stronger. Weak now is well because they're getting stronger then, which is why Russia attacked afterwards. Our evidence says that all empirics of defense response to data expensive. That's a McMahon evidence. That they do not answer that word. They said offensive realism. That'll be answered below. The China stuff is wrong. The China stuff is wrong. One, no war. They're not going to war 40 years. Two, international institutions. China's embedded them. They see reform, not place free trade. The economy is dependent on Western trade, making severance impossible. That's both. The stuff of how to explain Taiwan nuclear modernization is relevant. It's nuclear modernization defensive. Lender to about 10 out every work report. Focusing on FCC rule and war, attending military gains. Bolsters credibility, CC rule, purely after percent training. Political topics. Offensive realism is wrong. He votes neg. Summer 24. Excellent factor Western peace narrative is worth, but also put on the London and record for Western democracy. Western believe evidence of democracy, abstract and made believe. Concrete Korean Western never interested in doing that. Now, go North Korean Iran stuff. There's not highlighted one scene. So we get new answers to that. Go to overreach. Fisheries are sustainable now. The one C lacks uniqueness. This is entirely uncrowded one C. They asserted that they're declining now, but this is uncrowded to suck out for flow. One, data. Catches are holding steady. We cited recent data. The one C card is from 2021, which is we cannot. So the data is in there is wrong and is old. Two, high seas fishing. It's the only type they saw with 6% catches. Three, technology. Use satellite enforcement technology to deter fish crimes. Four, subsidies. They're ending making overfishing a problem. Five, they only start for globally. Global fish stocks fill in. That's better evidence. Now the clean water stuff and pandemic stuff is wrong. It's solved by the combine. The Alaskan flexibility stuff is the only thing they've adapted to. It's incoherent. The app's burden to explain how strengthening Alaska right and not getting vetoed by EPA improves Alaska's ability to stop a terrorist or critical infrastructure attack. Alaska not having flexibility to blatantly violate Clean Water Act, and Pebble is not limited flexibility to do anything else without safeguarding fish or water supplies or responding to emergencies. The getting 6 impact does not help if they cannot explain internally, because even if it's about a Pebble, that does not solve terrorist or critical infrastructure.
Are you good for cross?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna take a second. I'm taking a second.
Sure.
You might have to. Okay. 7:39. I'm good.
Good?
Yeah.
Alright. Good? Alright.
Yeah.
To be clear, your warrant for limits is teams getting access to non-Arctic regions, like, quote, Greenland, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, and Iceland, correct?
Yeah, it's not.
So that means that under your term, teams cannot read those affirmatives, correct?
It's not about they can't read non-Arctic parts of those countries. They can read Arctic parts of those countries, though.
Wait, what's the distinction?
Well, Canada has an Arctic part that's above the Arctic Circle. They can read apps in that area. You cannot read apps below the Arctic Circle in Canada.
Wait. So
You know,
what
for
DA
Greenland,
do you lose to cooperating in the left of Canada
Well, okay,
instead of the
this
right
is a
of Canada?
limits question, not a ground question. The ground question is a distinct internal
Wait. So like, what AF has been read that circumvents a topic generic that's like non-Arctic? Name me one.
So this is a ground question about circumventing topic generics, not a
Wait.
limits question.
You just said limits and then you said ground. So like.
No. You're taking the interlinks differently. The interlink to limits is reading non-Arctic apps that are like apps that are below the Arctic Circle but still Arctic
all right,
countries.
cool.
The interlink to ground is different from
I want to read to you this thing that you said on AF ground, right? AF still get the same advantage areas about Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Canada, US. What advantage area or counterplan deficit has ever come from a non-Arctic region, and what AF exists?
What
Can you give
app
me an
exists in
example?
in a non-Arctic region? Your app, dude. You
Like
need
so
a
besides
southern
Pebble,
Arctic.
which you have
besides
clear
Pebble.
REMs stats to, what other app do you think has circumvented like topic generics? Like this app can still lose to the Arctic pick. Like what's the reason why the Arctic pick doesn't apply to this one?
What doesn't apply to this one? Okay, first of all, our interlink is not only about the Arctic pick, but about this ads for the ground question. Because
This app still angers Russia. You
Huh?
put Putin in the ones. We would still deter Russia and China. Like what ground?
Okay, you deter them. That does not mean you don't link that does not mean you link to the Russia dissent or something.
Like
or you anger
link
Russia.
term the Russia dissent. I'm
The-
kind of
the word
confused.
for
Like,
resource dissent is because
it's the
it's not
same set of
uniqueness.
countries,
So
similar regions,
here,
and very cold
Jimmy,
climates.
you're missing the interlink for resource decides. It's about uniqueness, not about the link. So the issue with that is that non-Arctic places have already been mined, and apps can say that they're just going to reopen a place that will be mined. in the future.
Pebble hasn't been mined. Arctic regions have been.
I'm like
That seems like an
99
app argument for linked uniqueness with an egg.
First of all, that's just like wrong though, because they got vetoed because the mining was bad.
Right.
That's what
So
happened. It was
that means
mined before.
mining is low right now in
Yeah, but
supposed
the
regions.
Tuisi literally said that Pebble mining in the past dumped on the export control decide. You cannot say this doesn't apply.
So the app making a thumper argument is
No,
sufficient
I'm saying
for
this
the egg?
proves our argument about uniqueness on the ground interlink, because it says that
All
you
right.
can just say that the mining already
All right.
happened in the
Yeah,
past.
that's
so it's
fine.
U.S.
Thank you.
uniqueness.
Restrict counterplan. To be clear, this restrict all EPA future authority under Section 404C for, banning permitting, right? Yes.
Yeah, through Congress.
All right.
Because Congress can restrict the executive.
All right. Got it. Thank you.
1 hour sent.
You wanna- While you are getting it, I'm gonna get some.
I might also want to go to the bathroom.
Hydration is good.
I am good.
Awesome.
Wait, actually, I don't have the doc.
Okay.
After I got that, I should be ready. So, what's the order?
Okay. The order is Alaska counterplan. The the politics decide, and then the export controls decide.
Politics and expert. Sure.
Awesome. Panel? Cool.
Alaska these terms, the test competition, not empties. I'm not going for it. Any theory is reaching that argument because their offense is predicated, offense is going for it. Condo, we get what we did. One neg flex, and grounders, we actively can speak first and last. Infinite prep, and the topic is F bias is huge, and there's no need to find generics. F stand backing Vegas with infinite Trump plumpers. Condos keep equal playing field. 2 argument innovation, 2 unsurprising first, uncertainty discourse, argument innovation, other sharp 3, if boxing, or is not only condo per students. 4 logic stats is always logical, often goes particularly director of research. 5 skill level, TDAs, impact and speed, research and coaching. Deck fairness, 6 diminishing utility, cost on purpose and theory check. 7 to an R club stalls. 8 reject the argument. Another team still is bad. 1 neg flex, so let's F choose the block. 2 force purpose, teams that play to be permed. 3 logic kind of bad does not prove F good. 4 links to search new arguments because teams fear the straight shard. Cap. Concede the perms, I'm not going for it. Politics. Concede that Trump CC is terminally cooked right now because of the series of events. That means it'll be bumped no matter what, and they can't answer any winners win because it's terminally cooked right now. But caused by impact defense to disease, that's the impact of this, so this is irrelevant, and at least in the counter plan, because it also is conditional action, so it can't be offense. Export controls. U.S.-China trade war is existential. Chinese export controls, fuel retaliatory by tariffs, and controls with trade tit for tat, escalation controls and restrikes, malware attacks, drone strikes, and U.S. first strike, and Miscal, they're all likely directions for escalation in our ways. 1, break there's peace now, Anglo-Dutch wars, World War I, and Pearl Harbor all prove prolonged trade wars, escalate, the plan flips the scales. 2, speed, China reacts to the plan immediately, it's a huge threat to the almost in the market. That's Morales, and boot, any conflict is spiraled into extended nuclear exchange, creating 23 U.S. and China use a single nuke, extended nuclear exchange, China don't respond to U.S. nuke, if China pro regardless, escalation, nuclear exchange, U.S. use Chinese landing strikes, U.S. strikes, airfields, retaliate, ICBM, data, limiting strike, border exchanges, inevitable. The link went drop. China receives new REM supply chains as a threat to their market dominance. They respond with heavy REM export conditions that crush industries and believe China's monopoly on refinement decks F solvency while still provoking China. That's all Kobayashi. The link alone straight turns advantage. 1, we're winning. The only way we can get uranium is through China, but the plan makes them stop exporting it to us. They respond to new U.S. supply chains by manipulating markets through export restrictions, and ultimately they flood the market and leverage refinement with decks U.S. operations. Canada 25. China weaponized dominance by imposing export controls on strategic minerals, restricted air exports, reduced dependence, number of significant hurdles, domestic refining expansion, slow 10 to 20 years. Investors hesitant in China maintains fully integrated supply chains, cheaper and more efficient. Need of action increases Chinese farm flood the market with minerals drive down prices, make U.S. operations financially unsustainable. Alternatives to Chinese refining remain limited. China dominates Japan and COVID face concerns. The higher proximity causes geographic proximity, hidden vulnerability, stockpiles, temporary China's ability, the markets and complete strategies, prices surge, price crisis reduce, incentives for domestic extraction. If they cross apply case on the refinement stuff, it's all wrong and irrelevant. 1, time frame. Mining starts immediately, but it takes 10 to 20 years to build an entire REM refinement facility, so we rely on China in the interim. Even then, there's no reason it's price competitive with Chinese refining. 2, market manipulation. China still turns the case for flooding the market, which crushes probability for the plan. Pebble Watch is wrong. 1, China concedes their key to refinement. 1 2 PW. 20, the U.S. have to buy refined product back from China. 2, Japan fails. China has refinement monopoly. They control over 90% of the market. That's Kobayashi. Before it, we posted them by 5 years. Even if Japan has refinement capabilities 5 years ago, they don't now. Thumpers are wrong. Trade tensions have eased. Trump and Xi have agreed to remove all tensions under REM and issue general licenses for exports, but tensions could burn the deal. That's slaughter. No thumpers. They're all priced in, and China doesn't view them as threatening because they're too small and fail. And the unique counter plan solves. Their evidence concedes that those attempts fail now. 2, Seeking McCarthy. 25, Trump's tariffs made it harder for American companies to source minerals, cut off the federal funding, harm mining warfare's trading programs, and research in critical minerals. The deal ceased export restrictions, but there's still tensions. So what I had 1225, Beijing demonstrated willingness to use supply chain choke points to equal little export restrictions on minerals, trade vulnerabilities, critical tools, trade deal, Chinese suspend export controls, rare earth, trade measures rather than escalation. Retaliations have stabilized in the short term, suspending export controls. Logan 11.1, China will suspend export controls, REM, strategy, and ease tensions. China will issue licenses value for export of the rare earths, meaning the federal removal of controls and acceptance of other leader stabilizations in the short term. The deal is momentary stabilization. Jackson 1030, China's statement provides ambiguity and flexibility to deliver a rare earth called its tactical stabilization at the moment. Other REMs is wrong. They cannot go for this. When they drop the link, Pebble Mine is key to expansion of all U.S. REMs, which is bad. That's wrong. But Remium is enough because it still threatens their market in that specifically, which they will retaliate to. Lithium starts and ends at 0. They've highlighted like 1 of 20 minerals China has advantage in. China maintains a monopoly over everything else, and lithium advantage is wrong. Their card says that the U.S. has a potential new mine, not that they have a lithium advantage. China Econ Impact D is a swing and a miss. The impact isn't about China's economic decline, but escalating tensions resulting from trade wars. Arms sales is incoherent. It's not about trade or RMs, which is RDA, and they haven't explained this. The one year we knew, so you reject it. Trade defense is wrong. Most recent studies prove almost 24 every move, however, reaching unintended consequences can push nations closer to conflict. Great powers is likely dependent on trade. View access to security and necessity. If they anticipate positive trade, they strengthen peace. If they lose fear, if they fear losing, they lead to war. This is back in the DNA of modern politics, which is learned about the world wars. That has indicating the benefits of trade to avoid conflict in the war. This 1945 offers hope. Trade is the only force preventing global war. Jackson 25, tensions are escalating. One force indeed is restraining global conflict. That force is globalization. Globalization makes war unwise. The countries are about to create conflict because self-sabotage, fragmentation, weakening, independency, company stabilizing. Those powerful deterrents, shared consequences about nations, economic intake on conflict, too costly cooperation, only viable path countries must prevent war, are most economically disconnected, isolation, making aggression cheaper. Economics proves over at L25. Commerce is about a war, opportunity cost of war, for cost will depend depend on strength of interdependence. Will gains from trade cannot be maximized in war, causing signaling theory, country signaling readiness to go to war. We saw no more you get a reaction that FDI is postponed. Mark at postponed.
Okay, 9:55.
We have the doc. We're just good for we're good for the order.
Okay, it's overreach, supply, T, restrict counterplan, export controls, DA.
Put it in one.
Yeah.
Alright.
We need one sec. I'm good.
Trade blockchain terminal disease, terror, and infrastructure, all existential cases wars are going for disease causes disease through knock-on effects, search trade, proved by COVID infrastructure collapse, causes ripple effects from climate shock, also turns to terrorism. It's independent and existential. It does spill over Alaska autonomy, friends. Federal encouragement, the internal link is robust because federal encouragement from the CWA stops Alaskan regulatory autonomy. Any risk of it if the internal is sufficient, only reinvent legal evidence on Alaskan federalism saying it's unique, they don't have a card, and you know extinction is inevitable in the status quo. Now, advantage one, non-US countries are irrelevant adversaries. Doing it is solved by US modernizing. That's Ferguson and PhD's parity precisely because the US has better capabilities. It doesn't fail when you see evidence. And two is the Ferguson tends to create parity and can be successful but only with medium cooling. The one T read a card, but the block explained it new, which justifies new answers. Now it's not. Big detected is our argument because adversaries will know we haven't. When you see white says perception alone creates a quote nuclear terrain, which is independently solves the DA. Now Russia is revisionist defensive responses, misreads it. Russia violated international law in Ukraine despite decades of past NATO buildup, but Ukraine wasn't even in NATO by the time they invaded Popescu, which cites broader buildup and Putin's speeches criticizing the international order. China is too also dropped Iran and North Korea, which are highlighted and want to see evidence. Yes, foreign international institutions is not the same as not militarizing their modernizing for nuclear system, which is distinct. Swain is from 21, and Mearsheimer says NATO caused World War caused war and won. That doesn't answer China too. It doesn't answer our uniqueness arguments because even if NATO started, Russia won't end until we deter them. T. The Arctic includes all of Alaska, that's AP. We're better for predictability. ADHR is the definition that is, quote, most commonly used and combines heterogeneous cultures that reflects true Arctic territories differ to plain meaning or on subjective geographic interests. On no reason to default to U.S. definition on an international topic with 6 bigger Arctic nations. Now, predictability outweighs against rep, makes it limits useless means limits can't turn legal definitions wrong. Our definition is legal too. Viva and domestic government definition that says it's all of Alaska. AAPC. The 50 Commissioner recommends all federal agencies understand the international policy of Alaska should be the U.S. Arctic Alaska as engaged in Arctic development. U.S. definitions are useless for defining the oceans, the Arctic, there is definite context. U.S. Arctic Council progressive to other definition for all purposes. Ours from the Arctic Council, SouthCon, AT definition of the Arctic Council, all the Arctic Research Council documents, like the ADHR, its most common option. 24, the Arctic Friday ADHR, the most commonly used takes in about all of Alaska, but predictability are now off ground outweighs neg ground. One Arctic peak, southern Alaska is the only place with unique domestic minerals. It's the only way to check back against mine somewhere else. Counterplans. Here's a graph USGS inserted to uniqueness. Trump already opened the entirety of northern Alaska, which here's the advantage ground inserted. They graph that unopened land is state land, which is obviously untenable for apps, which I'll insert another graph here. Air app, they get the block and infinite condo apps already behind because Alaska has been the advantage ground, and we need Fed, US, and Alaska key warrant to be straight to your net ground. Unique minerals are automatically creating resource DAs, and the advantage straight turns. They say exploration and development are meaningless. Wrong. They are restricted to mineral labs. US code 22 exploration restricted minerals include geophysical surveys, oil, and natural gas determined by the preceding development these activities. All these discovered minerals for purposes not producing minerals discovered. They say it's huge. The exact quantity of land is irrelevant. Maps prove that it's untenable for ground. Blah. Function limits check. Their term is limits for limits' sake. One, every app must be minerals, which originates built-in resource DA. Small new apps have zero advantage ground. They have uniqueness. Arctic regions have been mined less, so DAs and apps are unique. That was cross-legs 2. Arctic pick and Arctic DAs. Check non-intrinsic Arctic apps are cross-legs proves that Greenland Nordic apps are inevitable even under their terms. So since they have parts above the Arctic Circle. 3 states counterplan and baked in politics DAs steamroll the smallest apps. 4 international counterplans checks non-US relevant apps. 5 Arctic environment, military, and trade-off DAs ensure ground. Their ground case is terrible. 2 the explanation is about Arctic links being key, whether it's above 66 degrees north has zero bearing on deterrence. Export. Restriction counterplan. Per new about the Shields from Lincoln, seen as the same court ruling, counterplan alone links if China cares enough about district court rulings, the counterplan will be seen in US greenlighting future mines. The air restriction of the EPA pebble is thumped by other mines, and the DA can't solve restriction of authority, misses the boat. Argument is about cooperative federalism, not EPA overreach. That's GBN's app, not ours. The counterplan is federal intrusion. It creates an incoherent court decision because it overrides a mine that Alaska wanted. This means pebble is key. It's not just Clover, but court doctrine. DA. New need is counterblades justify new one-year explanation, so striking one in our appeals to
Also
new
means perm dual shield.
also means for new both shields, regardless, it doesn't disprove our thumbers, which are other minerals and from other countries. It also doesn't disprove the linkage before. Trump has already sent negative signal to China. Now, impact calc the FO waste it solves the American-China war because the U.S. has hypersonic superiority and China's can counter China's capability. COVID-08 and fight in straight war disproved tide rate creating a straight turn by our hypersonics advantage, which was done on case. Now, the link is not even close to being dropped because the thumber is fully responsive to Kobayashi is about lithium. And China does not care about lithium. Card Zero says that once the evidence is horrible, it says like Pebble, Google, Red Dog Mine, and Amber Road, both are examples that the block dropped. They said the threshold of the link is perception, so every mine built thumbs. It's not a matter of Japan conceded from case that domestic refinement solves Woodward CA. Suffers from uniqueness link mismatch between thumpers are definitive. The seed evidence about other mineral seed. 1225 other mineral sectors allowing is about a semiconductor supply chain. And Pebble Key was not dropped. They have listed about the minerals that the Pebble create, but we have evidence that lithium is high in Colorado without waves.
And yeah, it's terminally thumped and case solves the impact.
Terminally thumb, case solves the impact.
Yeah.
DA 0.
7:30 something.
9.
7:39, yeah. Start now. everybody good for the order?
Yeah.
Order is the export controls facade,
Export control.
the restrict counter plan,
Export control restrict.
the overreach advantage,
Restrict.
and then the supply advantage.
I'm good.
Okay, panel.
Tell us spread. Oh, okay. U.S. China trade by ways, tax export controls, through transfer terrorist controls, cost, tip for tax escalation, transfer sales, manual attacks, drone strikes, U.S. first strike, and miscount, all likely effective factors escalation and outweighs, actually strike the U.S. first strike stuff, and outweighs, 1, break this peace down, and good dust wars, World War 1, pull all proof, prolonged trade escalates the plan, flips the kill, 2 speed, drop this perception-based, China perceives the plan, as immediately is a huge threat to market dominance, and the market, they respond immediately, after snares are slower than descent, and they drop the link to straight turns advance 1, means we don't have to cover, I don't have to touch that advance, and it means that disad is effectively an advance what is add-on for the disad, because they drop time frames, so the disad solves the disad means F cannot solve the scenario, but the disad solves the F faster than they can solve the first advantage, which is offense for us. You can only die once, so live to fight another day. Now do both things as a shield. 1, advance the plan by banning quote jump-starting production. 2, the cabinet stops executive orders from being carried out, and it does not send a signal U.S. is reneging, because China has not perceived them, because they dropped the 1 and we had the executive orders have not gone through now. The 1 and we had those receive evidence is that the Trump evidence says that executive order don't happen yet. The cabinet just stops the executive order from happening, which it is not perception based because China did not perceive it, because it did not happen yet. Now other minerals countries is vague. Is that disproven internally? F is more than radium. It's also silver and copper, which the world's evidence was dropped in 1ER. Other countries do not dump. This is due in the 1ER. Countries lack the mineral supply. They cannot be mining stuff or allies. They cannot be mining stuff now, or the ally stuff in first advance would be salt and status quo if other countries are mining it now, which means they cannot make this argument, and it's also new in the 1ER. To strike after flow, they drop the link straight towards advance 1. But winning this, it's the only way to get the radium through China. The plan makes them stop exporting it to us. China perceives new REM supplies into the market dominance. They respond with heavy REM export restrictions that cost industries, and mainly China's monopoly refinement Dex F policy are still provoking China. That's the Kobayashi evidence. Now, the F cannot solve the impact. Countering Chinese capabilities is not it, but rather that small conflicts will escalate to broader nuclear war. The difference is that this set does not rely on China being deterred, because it's the U.S. who starts conflict, not China who starts conflict. Their scenario is that China first strikes the U.S. because China thinks that they have more capabilities. They think that they have more capabilities and more hypersonics than the U.S. Our scenario is that China would react to U.S. tariffs, which cause a trade war, which is a different scenario for escalation, which it's the different actor who starts the conflict in the first place. The F cannot solve it because it's not. And also the comment, and also we stay tuned this. So time frame means we solve the first events. We solve the time frame means that impact comes faster, so the impact cannot solve ours in the first place, which was the time frame one above. Now the lithium argument is wrong. The 1ER sounded very good and very efficient here, but failed to do line by line. You can see the numbers are priced into uniqueness because China knows small scale and not a threat. Before we have uniqueness, about export controls. We highlight McCarthy evidence. It says that all the attempts to increase U.S. minerals failing out, which Trump discussed the federal funding of cooking mineral programs now. Perception does not make sense because China knows all U.S. attempts fail now, so they do not have to launch controls. Lithium is incoherent. 1, Kobayashi is not only about lithium. Look at the we highlight. It's like 20 other minerals surrounding it. Means China has incentive in every other, has an advantage in every other mineral, but this doesn't link back to this side because pipeline is broadly treated REMs, which is the 1 and 2 roll evidence, which is we can see the 1ER 2 no advantage. The card is terrible. Says that this new potential mine U.S. Does that say the U.S. has started mining there? The seed we had is wrong. Even if there are other minerals, REMs are specifically key to some military affairs and what China has monopoly in. They've not read evidence that the U.S. has had in them. Domestic requirement, it cannot solve it. One of our preempted this cost at one time frame. Evidence says U.S. has interest building them, but it takes decades. They construct, which is too long for a 2 price. China's refining is uniquely cheaper, more cost competitive. Proving viability U.S. refinement. 3, market manipulation. China still to turns case, but flooding markets, which costs profitability to plan. Nobody will mine in Pebble because China simply does it cheaper. Means that they have a price advantage in the market, so that anybody else mining will be priced out of the market. So it fails and stats grow. Now go to the restrict counter plan. It stalls advance too. Do both cannot shield links to export this set. It sends a broader signal the US is trying to attack Chinese supply now. Future Minds what is new, the 1 year strike after flow. It's also wrong because this set is about short-term Chinese attack. You can only die once. It does not link to the Future Minds word. It's about long-term, which is this thing for this set, which is the time frame word under this set. It does not link to benefit that's above onto Future Minds. It does solve the case though. Reason cooperative federalism matters is that the federal government overreaches on Alaska, then Alaska may be the test case for the app, but the legal evidence about it is citing overreach broadly. The comment restricts the EPA from ever overreaching again. This advance about how we need cooperative federalism, and the EPA veto authority is bad for that because EPA authority restricts the federal government. This advance lacks a reason. EPA is key to it. The majority advances that future vetoes are bad, and the Automatic Clean Water Act. The comment solves future vetoes bad offense by having Congress restrict veto authority in the first place. It restricts veto authority. EPA can now no longer undermine Clean Water Act, which solves disease and fish stuff. Comment also solves Alaskan flexibility, which means the EPA can no longer constrain Alaska, so it cannot be flexible in the first place. Now, use of fishery framing, bears solvency to status quo, and Alaskan flexibility is that way by both decided case. Printing both links to benefit, that's above. Anything else? Yeah.
430. 446.
Hard down.
Everyone good? Awesome.
The two R's bank zero in case on a single unwarranted, uncarded analytic will consider the most important argument in the debate, dropping revisionism, placing the entire diss that Russia and China are the evil forces that are hell-bent on destroying the international order absent tourists. What breaks out paradise magnitude or certain that conflict is imminent in the status quo. When I see whites that the POA is modernizing the strike into the Pacific. Russia has modernized the HJT capabilities in Europe and brought motives to attack that's categorically bigger than the VA because we act as an external impact to Russia deterrence that do not solve return. In addition to any conflict with China, this also turns the dissat because only effective deterrence capabilities needed for China for striking at all in the first place. This frames every turns case argument. Their dissat relies on China willingly processes minerals for us. That doesn't make sense against the deterrence advantage because if China wants to destroy us, why the hell would they refine our minerals and build our weapons for us, which literally makes zero sense. This means that the app is a countermeasure that solves the dissat because hypersonic capabilities can deter China from striking at all, which is the conceded solves the argument for the case, and the case solves the entirety of the dissat, so any risk of revisionism is not a half. Remember, the countermeasure only solves advantage 2 by overturning EPA veto authority. It doesn't touch any of the revision stuff on advantage 1, which frames the dissat. Now, I'm going to go to the dissat here. The framing issue here is the 2R dropped a lot of important in my arguments at the top. Do you really think that Trump's second magical detente deal with China, which hasn't caused extinction since 4 years of trade war in 2016, is suddenly going to go nuclear in 2025? This dissat defies common sense against a really, really big risk in the case. All empirics in the 1ER listed by name were dropped in the 2R. COVID killed the economy. 08 obviously killed the economy and killed trade in every single other trade war. Why did Trump's first term not cause conflict? The 2R has no counter explanation to any of that, so you should certainly default affirmative. Trump and Xi are not stupid. The 2R has zero explanation of how they go to war. I'm going to explain our scenario for war here. China is an offensive realist. This means that they care about reclaiming their status from the US. They think that the century of humiliation has denied their status, and they have a clear motive to launch weapons against Taiwan and our allies. The negative does not have any argument explaining motive, just as a generic diversionary war argument that's like, okay, somehow US strike first. The only card that they have to substantiate this is Kronig. That card is aft. Russell made an explicitly in the 1ER that card is about hegemony. Kronig is the big nuclear deterrence fan that says that maybe the US will miscalc, but only if the US can't nuke the hell out of Russia and China, which is what the plan does by upgrading our missile defense capabilities. This means that the case must come first because revisionism is the only explanation for that giving in this debate for how they solve war. The 2R was very flippy on how war happens, so if you try to explain it for them, that would be interventionist. They say brink. This is clearly disproven by all of our examples above. Speed. They also dropped the 1ER argument in the case that the app impact is also perception. By upgrading rhenium supplies in the United States, that sends the signal to China that we have an effective deterrent capability, which certainly solves all of this stuff. Remember, the countermeasure is isolated from all of this because it only solves advantage 2 and not advantage 1. US starts a war is zero unwarranted evidence besides Kronig, which I said was above. They say more hypersonics bad, completely unwarranted, also done by the deterrent stuff on case. Now, to DA turns case, I'll be very explicit here. The 2R blank on a very flippy one and link that is out of context. The turn would have made sense against a generic argument shortage for innovation advantage, but it is nonsensical against an advantage premise on deterring adversaries. The 1ER explicitly said, quote, case solves in that way with explicitly arguments referencing revisionism, striking US as incoherent, especially when they read a 2NC counterban that changed how the debate operates, so you should be okay with the debate being slightly late-breaking, few cross-applicable arguments. 1. Revisionism. China is hell-bent on destroying the US. If you cannot explain to me why an evil adversary like China would give their mortal enemy sufficient resources to deter them, you cannot vote on this because there is no warrant for it. 2. Thumbers, they simply apply. If the US has sent the signal of refinement to China, she knows that we want to deter them, so he will not give us supplies. 3. Uniqueness. This is the most important part. The problem is that no part of the status quo allows US rhenium extraction. The negative has no evidence that China can extract rhenium in the status quo, and they have no evidence that China has any of those supplies. We are the only team reading evidence that only in the southern part of Alaska can the US extract that resource in the first place. Even if China refines for us, they still cannot give us those capabilities because only the US extracting it in the first place solves. So the plan is a prerequisite to the dissat solving, which means that the revisionism stuff furtherly outweighs. Thumbers kill the dissat 0. Negative card in this debate says rhenium. The app wants 1. Rare earth minerals in the Arctic. We have controlling explanation for why that mineral is not key. To win the dissat, the negative must have convinced you that 1 out of 17 rare earth minerals is a linchpin for US-China trade. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Unfortunately, Woodward just does not have it. Their only card is like, oh, like Pebble, which is not or the only mine. Red Dog and Embler Road, double drop by the block in the 2R. This is a simple Google search. There are 2 other massive REM mines. We've been open up in Alaska. Rhenium is key to hypersonics, but zero reason those others wouldn't trigger out with this app. No, Christ didn't. The threshold for negative evidence that restarting Pebble is key to all mineral mining in the Arctic. To overcome thumpers, which is obviously false independently. Massive lithium mines, which their evidence actually says in the concept of these being episode in development places like Colorado, which thumps independence. 2R says it's about 20 other minerals. That's our argument. There's no reason why Pebble is key. They say it's just rhenium. That's wrong. Their card lists other minerals for extraction. As this Pebble is quote within the scope of efforts to secure long-term distance supply. That takes out the straight turn, means that trade relations are novel and resilient. Counterplan permutation 2 will certainly solves it. It's a massive signal from Trump, which would certainly outweigh all the other effort. They drop revisionism. GG's.
Card doc.
Neg Cardock is sent.
Boxes at the door.
Oh, yeah.
The decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative from MBA. So I think there's a moderately large risk of the disad that outweighs an advantage with a big risk of an impact but a very low risk of solvency. I think the big thing for me is I just think there's a massive risk that the link to the disad turns the case. There are embedded solvency arguments that I think are not really fully grappled with by the 1AR2AR. The first one is that it takes 10 to 20 years to scale up refining to secure mineral independence. I think the neg evidence is just much better on this question. The app evidence is like describing how onshoring has been a critical focus, and even reads a 1EC card that says we rely on East Asian markets for refining. I think the neg ev is just more prescriptive of the state of domestic refining capabilities. The second is that I think China will flood the market to make U.S. mineral extraction operations financially unsustainable. I don't really think there was really an on-point answer to this. I believe the only answer to both of these is that the evidence isn't really specific to rhenium. I think domestic refinement solves CARB better than 2AC, also doesn't fully meet this threshold. And as I mentioned before, I think the 1AC couple watch card even says that we're reliant on refineries in Asian markets, including China and Japan. I think the 2AR should do more to point out this and Japan and other markets part of this to lower the risk of turn solvency. It felt a little bit interventionist to connect the dots for you on that. I think part of the issue with app strategy for me is I think a lot of the best 1AR2AR arguments are a little bit uncarded. I think the thumper about Red Dog and Anglo Road and the trade war tiers are extremely intuitive arguments to me, but they don't really have evidence attached. And I'm not really amenable to like Googling it and figuring out who's right about the thumpers. It seems a little bit like a slippery slope to a very interventionist or truth-oriented decision. I think the other Arctic project thumper is largely answered by the combination of the uniqueness counterclaim to ban new mineral initiatives and the price-in arguments made by the neg. I think the neg's doing good analysis about why the projects haven't really been started yet. So technically, the EXO doesn't thump the perception link. Again, there's not really a lot of evidence on this, so I kind of just lean neg on the question. It's pretty easy for me to conclude it's not a super large risk of the thumpers, given there's not really evidence for it. I think the trade war empirically denied arguments give me a lot of pause. I think it's a very, very intuitive argument. I just think there's not really evidence attached. I think the 1AR2AR can get make this more persuasive to me if you re-highlight parts of their evidence about how it's about how past trade conflicts and how we Trump tariffed China earlier last year. I think the 2AR examples are a little bit missed the mark for me because they're just more about past recessions like 08 COVID, not necessarily about trade disputes. I thought a lot about the case solves the DA, and I ultimately had two issues. The first is that the time frame distinction drawn by the 2AR combined with the arguments about it takes 10 years to scale up processing makes me feel compelled to believe the case cannot solve a short-term trade war impact. And the second is that the 2AR does a good job extrapolating about how it could be the U.S. starting a war first. It's unclear how hypersonics would restrain the U.S. from escalating. Another argument that I thought about a little bit was that revisionism means China won't give U.S. REMs a push. I definitely think it might be a little new in 2AR. It seems not necessarily the most intuitive, given the premise that they're currently in charge of refining U.S. minerals and they have issue-specific uniqueness that we have to deal with them to not do export restrictions. I think maybe a better version of this argument would be more mineral restrictions in the long term are inevitable because U.S. and China are in a race for hegemony, not necessarily we're cutting them off now. I think the thumpers about lithium mines do a little bit of mitigation. I think it's mostly answered by issue-specific uniqueness, given the fact we made a trade deal despite the lithium mines and also the counterplan to not do new mineral processing initiatives. I also think the re-highlighting by the neg about how U.S. minerals are not receiving enough Fed support to really scale up now is pretty good and makes me skeptical. I thought that the lithium mine thumper was probably your best piece of mitigation. I think the other things could be better with more evidence. The last thing, the Kronig is app stuff. I'm there on that in real life, but given the evidence presented, I think they just read a generic impact card about how even using one nuke escalates, and I feel like we need a card for the Kronig stuff. Just a quick note for Woodward. I think the straight turn part is missing the defense. You're doing great on Link Turn's case, but there's not really a straight turn absent evidence that says China is sufficiently supplying uranium to the U.S. now.
So the very last thing Tony said is essentially why I voted out. So the only area where I disagree is on the link turns case stuff, which I think is the necessary defense that you need in order to avoid the conceded advantage in try or die framing. And I just don't think that you have card one that suggests that China can do anything about the rhenium markets So like, even if China floods the market in the United States, the affirmative has read evidence that seems to indicate to me that there is a military and thus economic need for the United States to domestically produce rhenium and to perhaps have that rhenium either refined in the United States or in Japan, both of which they've read evidence about, neither of which do I think is really contested outside of the fact, and I'll be very clear, that it would take a long time, which I do agree that you said. Your only defense to that, besides the time frame question, is this link turns case argument. But the link turns case stuff, they have read a bunch of evidence that actually specifically says in the 1EC that the Americas, both the United States and Chile, I think specifically are the countries that they talk about, are the ones that, so far as I can tell, which I find this totally insane, but like so far as I can tell in the evidence set, they're the only ones that have access to rhenium. You don't have any cards that say China could flood the market with rhenium. So like I don't understand how you could how the link to the DA alone could kill the impetus for the affirmative to be necessary, right? So like that's sort of the only area where I disagree with Tony's decision. I cited similarly, I think the risk of the disadvantage is rather high. I think the risk of the affirmative is obviously even higher because link turns case does not provide any defense to me for the scenario that they've chosen to go for, which essentially means that the impact to the affirmative is 100%, and the impact to the DA is not quite 100% because of thumper stuff that I'll get to a little bit later, right? Now, the other reason that my decision sort of like took so long is that I do think from like impact calculus perspective, Woodward is way ahead in the 2NR on the speed at which the impact happens. So like, I think that other things that could have framed my decision a little bit better is like an answer to like more try or die style arguments that, which is sort of like what the 2AR is saying when it comes to like Chinese revisionism means that they are hell-bent on destroying the United States. So your focus in the 2NR is sort of just like, they don't have defense to the way that a conflict starts. And we say that a conflict starts with a US drone strike on China or whatever else is in your impact evidence that broadly seems irrelevant to me because you've conceded that war between China and the United States is inevitable in the long run. So like, I don't really care how the war starts, I just care how the war is resolved at the end of the day. And it seems like the only real way to resolve the war is through a strategy of deterrence. And that even if that fails in the short term, it's going to happen in the long term. So it's sort of like irrelevant. And I think you need a little bit more pushback there. Here's a simple line that probably would have created that pushback for me that would have had me vote negative, which is that revisionism proves that if China is hell-bent on destroying the United States, they will choke off supply to production at some point in time to sort of like handicap the American military, which means that if they're right about revisionism, that speed is really all that matters. I think that there's some sort of like fundamental tension about the way that you all are describing China and the lack of pushback that you have about our ability to refine in the short term. Because if they are right, or if you are right about China's behavior, then like, I don't know why the advantage is not, or why the sort of like this ad here is not a little bit inevitable, because China could just cut off our supply to all these other REMs and sort of like trigger a conflict. But like, that debating is not really done. I also just think that like, the 2AR Jimmy should have been, I thought it was very good in a lot of different places. It should have been much better on try or die. Like, you're sort of like implicitly saying it with all this revisionism stuff, but you are not making the like direct argument that like uniqueness is terminally neg in a world where, or sorry, terminally apt in a world where China is revisionist, because that means that the conflict is sort of like going to occur. Like you need to have a much larger sort of like try or die push to push back against some of this time frame stuff, because time frame becomes irrelevant unless there's like, I don't know, something else, some sort of intervening actor, which is like not an argument that they made, that will be able to resolve that problem in the short term. So I felt like that 2AR would have made sort of like my decision much easier. A few other sort of like things for me where I also departed a little bit. I'm getting a little bit more defense to the DA on the thumper level than I think Tony is for two reasons. One, I think that your answer to the perm shield, the link to the uniqueness counter plan is basically just like this re-highlighting of the card that they have presented. And like your re-highlighting really just says that like Trump's strategy about tariffs is incoherent. It does not say that the United States will not be able to increase its mineral supply from those other countries. So like, I do think that the perm might shield the link because it would be like a pretty massive sort of like decrease in the United States domestic production of all these other rare earth minerals that are not rhenium, right? So at that point, I either sort of like think that the perm shields a lot of the link, or I judge pick the counter plan, in which case they have thumpers. So I thought they did have some thumper defense. Now, the reason that I still thought the DA was so high is I'm not giving them nearly as much impact defense as I think that Tony is, because Russell, I just didn't have enough of it in the 1AR, and maybe that's a flow issue for me. I had like one line of impact defense in the 1AR, and then I had like a shitstorm of it in the 2AR, and that was sort of like a mismatch for me. So like, I thought Thumper provided most of your defense, and impact defense sort of like gave me less, which is why I sort of agree though with what Tony is saying, that like, I think the 1AR should have way more impact defense, because I do think that like the length of the trade war, the already escalatory spiral of reciprocal tariffs between the United States and China, like all of these things very intuitively disprove the DA, and for me at least, they don't require evidence. Now, the area where I agree about requiring evidence is like, I'm not Googling the Red Dog mine and stuff like that. And like, I have, like, don't get me wrong, you know, like, we research, so I'm familiar, but I'm not doing it. Read a card. And this is one where, like, I think that you all probably should have took prep time. I don't know if you didn't have a huge 2AC to this DA, because, like, but you maybe should have just took some prep time before the 2AC to cut a card or two. Or at least maybe that's something you could have been doing, Russell, while Jimmy was doing other stuff, just so that you had cards on those things. Like, even if they're bad cards, I think that anything would have been helpful.
Echo radium specificity being huge. Doesn't take out the DA, obviously, because you've read that Pebble also gets access to other critical minerals or whatever, and I think that you all either want to be doing more to defend against that or push back against that link, or, and I'll talk, maybe your plan tech should be rhenium specific rather than just like generic in terms of that. But I do think it insulates them from turns the case, definitely. You need a piece of evidence that says that China processes the rhenium or produces the rhenium. Like either one of those two, I think, gets you access to the turns the case argument that you want to go for. But absent that, I'm not sure that it does exist. One of the cards they read in the 1AC says China produces rhenium, but you don't point that out to me, or I'm not going to do the work for you on that. So yeah, you get a risk of a disad. I don't know that you get as much turns of case as you need to be able to win it. I give more credit for the Red Dog and Ambler. I did struggle with it for a little bit. I agree that a card would be absolutely awesome here. You had two chances to answer it. Did not accept either one of them. And yes, it does rely on me having done some topic research. Like before this topic existed, did I know what Ambler Road is? No. Do I know now? Yes, but like I voted against them on a Venezuela bumper that was uncarded last night. But like, everybody knows we invaded Venezuela. Like at some point, I'm willing to insert some like, yes, this is common sense. We should know about this into the debate. So I give them credit for the bumper. That there are some. I did struggle with. Does your counter plan stop that? Are those XO related? My knowledge doesn't extend that far to it. But I think the onus is on you to say our counter plan will solve these bumpers and things like that to kind of push back against. Some of that revisionism makes conflict inevitable. That's just like terminal defense to the DA that you can't account for. I agree with Ellis that like the only scenario where we win that war is one where we've developed a deterrent capability. The only hope for doing that is the plan. So even if maybe you do access a little bit quicker. And I think that another area where you all could be good, so like the 2AR kind of comes back to, we've had these trade fights with China before, China's economy has suffered before, things didn't pop off. Leaning into that a little bit more, and like the fact that we are currently in trade negotiations with China after having a trade dispute kind of suggests that like common sense can win out in the end or whatever. I get that there's maybe some tension with revisionism stuff, but like you should be like, there's a difference between willing to go to conflict to like reclaim Taiwan or something like that, which the revisionist goals are, and then having a petty war over like an economic dispute, right? Like doing more to draw that distinction, I think would be super helpful for the affirmative in terms of winning some defense to the disadvantage. I think that's it.
One thing that I'll say that I forgot to say earlier didn't factor in my decision at all, but just like for the future, for this DA and for you all, like, I don't think they've actually read a link card at any point in the debate. Like, I will read you slowly the entirety of the Kobayashi card as presented. China implemented export restrictions. That's a description of the past. Rare earth extended to military equipment. China dominates market for market and refining. Restrictions based on overwhelming dominance in international market. 48% of rare earth distributed in China. Refining market dominance more pronounced. Over 90% world must rely on Chinese refining to utilize. Heavy rare earths imposed export restrictions. Issue of refining is not solved. U.S. mines rare earths. Exports almost all to China. Like, they don't read a card at any point that says that if the United States increases its capacity, China will reignite the trade war or will reignite restrictions. That is the only link that is read in the entire round. Everything else is like turns case. Like, I did not think, and I do agree with like again, this didn't factor into my decision at all. Like, they've said thumpers, which questions the inevitability of the dissad, but it does not question whether or not China will, sort of like push back on the United States if they increase domestic production. But I think you all have card 0 that says if the United States increases domestic production, that China will actually push back via some sort of like export tariffs or something else. Like, I don't think that card is read in the debate. So that's probably the area that I would push a little bit more on in the future because, and maybe your card does say that, but definitely not the highlighting that was presented in the debate round.
One more thing that I thought of. There's some tension between China will use export controls to stop the U.S. from getting stuff, and China will flood the market with the element. Like, if China floods the market with rhenium, the U.S. buys a bunch of rhenium and develops hypersonic technology, solves the app, right? Like, so, like, does not turn the app should be an answer that you put out. Like if your advantage was more structured around the U.S. needs to control the supply for certain reasons, then yes. But if it's just there's a shortage of this mineral and we need it, please flood the market.
Yeah, that would rule. The real problem is processing. And like, if you all would have had more defense to processing that was not just like time frame oriented, which to me doesn't matter as much in like a try or die scenario, or if you have like head-to-head defense, either of those would have been helpful for me. Or I guess this one.
Okay.
Who's gonna make it?
So ways to get a neg ballot card that says that China controls rhenium, then a line to the 2NR that says that revisionism is like a red herring because it basically explains why China would do export controls in the first place and explains the scenario for the dissad.
For me at least, Rishi, you're overcomplicating it. If Whit is right that there's a card in the one I see, and I didn't see this, I read the cards, I didn't see this personally. If Whit is right that there's a card that says China can produce rhenium, that card alone would have given you enough access to link turn the case for me that it might have served as enough defense to the affirmative.
I believe it says U.S., China, and highlighted Chile.
Okay. Yeah. Is that like the Asian market access card?
I can go back and look.
It's
I
the
just
one about
recall.
Chile. If it's that,
Yeah.
I definitely read that card, but I have a tendency to only read the highlighted
Right,
unless
yes,
the card is contested. So I didn't read the China part. I probably wouldn't have voted differently because it wasn't contested, obviously. But like, I just think you needed access to the lane turns case argument, and that to me, at least, which would have given you a 2-1, would have served as adequate defense. The only area where I really disagreed with Tony is like, I didn't think that lane turns the case provided enough defense for me.
Okay. And then to make the risk of the dissad higher and preempt the 2AR, just like try or die, then all of them that. Just like make time frame matter more.
I think a strategy to deal with revisionism is deterrence does not solve revisionism. Like, maybe it temporarily delays it. New tech advances mean that in the future you should do that. I think maybe that gives you more access to time frame should matter more than.
Yeah, I think a little bit more just like time frame should matter more than inevitability, because if the risk of the disadvantage is high enough, then like a very high risk of a short-term impact should outweigh a long-term impact. Even just like an intervening actors claim, right? Like, if we are right about 10 to 20 years of processing, by then we might have a different mineral that is not rhenium that we can use for new advanced weapons, right? Like, any sort of like intervening actor style defense, I think would be helpful.
Okay. This is relevant for the 2-0, but for the counter plan, the restrict counter plan, Do you think it solved the second advantage?
Okay, one second, let me talk about that. That counterplan never should, like, the argument that you all need to make is that if the court says that the EPA cannot do this, then the challenges to the EPA ruling will be ruled on via precedent, and Alaska will win its challenges in the court and the pedal line will open. Right? Does that make sense? Like, that's how the court works, is that if the government comes out and says you are not allowed to do what the EPA did, then the existing challenges in the court to the EPA's overreach that you have identified will go in favor of Alaska. So like,
I was confused because I thought they said that it wasn't the court, like there was not.
well, but even if it isn't the court, even if it's Congress restricting the authority,
Yeah.
then they would challenge and say the EPA does not have this authority. Like, Congress has officially, like, the whole reason, if you read your cards, which I did last night because I thought we might be dating you all, you know, like if you read your cards, all of your cards are about sort of like, well, they're all about Chevron, really. They're all about sort of like agency versus congressional sort of ambiguity and who we should side with in that particular scenario. If Congress explicitly says side with us, then the court challenges are now considerably easier than you need to side with Congress's interpretation, which means that the EPA's strike down of this and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which we don't really talk about in this state, but those will all be overturned. Like, this would be a clean kill on that particular
So
matter.
just all in on, this is the app that links to net benefit over.
In the long
Or
term,
it
it would
would
result in the affirmative happening, which means that there can be no net benefit.
Well, and also just an impact to the particular use of the veto that is not pedal mine, like in this sense, like, right? So like, even if they're like, we stop future vetoes, if you had this veto is bad, impact, they have to deal with that.
Or just even if not pebble, like other mines. Like you all need to ban pebble or ban like other mining projects, like to
Yeah.
deal with that.
Yeah.
For the thing for MBA, I think just more try die than a map. You all need you need impact defense so that stands for try die.
Jimmy, if the 2AR had been like a much bigger try or die push instead of just like revisionism means it's inevitable. If you like would have explained the implications of that and done sort of what the 2NR was doing with time frame, but with inevitability in the 2AR, I would not have spent so much damn time like reading cards and figuring out the link turns case stuff and everything else. I just would have been like, okay.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah. So just the truth that's like every world of voting NAF is extinction. Some worlds where you vote NAF is not extinction. NAF.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would have been helpful because I do think that like the one area where the 2NR is definitely better than the 2AR is impact rating.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. So, yeah, I get all of that. Anything? That's pretty good and informative for me.
I don't know. That was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
The T debating in the 2 and C could have been better, more offensive. After the cross X, I was like,
Yeah, I do think
this is not going anywhere.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. The cross X, you're sort of like the cross X made me think that you're not really backwards planning about what you want your impact to be. Like all the arguments that you have really made that are impacted out about why limits matter are sort of like fairness style arguments about the neg's ability to compete in debates. And if you have access to all the same core generics, I don't know why the placement of the affirmative matters. Like, I was very confused at the end of cross-examination what part of negative research or what part of negative strategy would change in a world of them having access to the entirety of Alaska if all of the same negative generics apply. Because, yeah, you're right, there would literally be more affirmatives. But, like, ultimately, what is the impact to limits that you have presented besides fairness and negative ground? And then in cross-X, you're just like, we still have all the same ground. So like, I just did not think that there would be an impact to your T argument and there would be an impact to their predictability stuff.
Where you need to get is that you need to be able to predictably research specific links and specific counterplan solvency cards to make those generics viable to win. It's not a uniqueness issue. Well, in some ways it's a uniqueness issue, but absent specific links and specific counterplan solvency evidence, they're going to be ahead on like specific link defense, specific solvency deficits, things like that. And so, in order like it's harder to thump a specific link, right, than it is a generic link. And like if you can't research those things because you can't predict it, like genetics code. So the predictability needs to be where you're getting generating most of your offense.
Okay. I guess correct 2 and R definitely, right? Right. Do you think restrict counterplan had to have that solve the second advantage? Yeah.
You would have had the same try or die problem, but it was better set up in the 1AR for try or die had you not had your restrict counterplan.
Yeah.
With advantage.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we're good.
Alright. Thank you all. Good
Thanks.
debate.
Good debate.
Thank you very much for having good debate. Are we remaining in this?
30 seat beat the 3 seated.
No.
I just saw that.
You live in every team. It's not just the
Oh wait, the challenge.
You want to go down to we might as well. Why don't you guys go down to the go down to the
I want to prove sounds.
Is it not on tab yet?